Quinton Donald Thompson graduated from the Maryland State Teachers College at Towson in 1942 with a bachelor's degree in elementary education. Mr. Thompson served in the Navy from 1942 until 1945. He then taught 5th and 6th grade at the McDonogh School. He was recalled for 3 more years of service in the Navy from 1950 until 1953. He returned to the McDonogh School, where he served as head of the McDonogh Middle School for 32 years. These are his reflections.
Mr. Thompson, thank you for sharing with us your thoughts about your preparation at Towson University and your subsequent career in education. This will, of course, add mightily to our understanding of teacher education across time and give us a sense of your enormous contribution to the field. I guess we should start in the beginning, and that is, if you would, could you tell us a little bit about your early social context, where you grew up, where you went to high school, when you began to think that maybe you would like a career in education, and when you decided that you would come to Towson University?
Well, thank you. How much time do I have?
As much as you need.
Well, I was born on June 15, 1921, and I'm one of 14 children with 2 wives. And my father and the older children were born in Buffalo Mountains down in southwest Virginia. And when I say mountains, they were mountaineers. But my father rose above it. He lived in a community, you might say, but way up in the mountains where the main production or livelihood was still mills, making of alcohol. And what would happen, there was a group of people, you might say they were Martin and the McCoys, but on Sunday they went to church. Dad was the superintendent. This was before I was born, but I wasn't born until we got down to near Roanoke, Virginia. But after church, there were 2 groups of people, as I said, the Martin and McCoys, you might call them. They literally went up into the mountains and declared war on each other. They had shootouts every Sunday. And what was Dad for? Dad had a wagon, and he hauled away the dead and the wounded.
Oh, my heavens.
And this was a Sunday affair. And finally, Dad just got tired of it, and he decided to move out. But before he moved out, he was very friendly with a gentleman up there that also was a Christian man, and he was terminally ill, and he asked Dad if he would marry his wife and take care of her. And she had 1 child. He had 1 child. Dad, being a fellowship man, he married her.
Wow.
Layla. Now, that was my mother. And that was the oldest of the children, whose name was Amon. And then he moved out of the mountains then, and down to a little town called Nace, Virginia, where I was born. And he bought a 154-acre farm that was highly mortgaged. And so, being a farmer, he had children in order to take care of the farm and raise the crops. and right on schedule. He had a child born every 2 years.
Oh, my heavens.
And then along came, well, before that, though, while living on the farm, we had 2 boarders. They were school teachers. And I had my oldest brother named Carlin, who got up every morning and took the school teachers to work. And it was about 4 miles away every morning. And on his way one morning, we had a very high-strung horse by the name of Jim, Red, to his buggy. And as he passed the train station, there was a loud whistle, and the horse stood straight up and bound for home, which was 1 mile away at that time where the train station was. And he called for the teachers to jump out the back because he couldn't control the horse. And unfortunately, Carlin did not jump out the back. He jumped out the side and got his feet caught in the reins of the bridle and dragged him 1 mile to his death. And at that time, I was 2 years old. And so along after that, as you well know, along came the Depression of 33? And Dad lost everything. When I say everything, I mean everything, but his old 35 Chevrolet. And he knew someone in Towson, Maryland, a friend of his. He called him up, and he got a job on a dairy farm, 1,500 acres, out at near Sparks, Maryland. And being a tenant farmer, and we had to go to school. The kids had, it cost us 10 cents a day to ride the bus. And so didn't take care of the little money we needed for general things. My brother and I, who was a little younger, we took care of there were 128 head of cattle, which were all milked by hand. We took care of the Guernsey farm. The Guernsey farm, the Holsteins produced the milk. The Guernseys produced the cream. And there were 32 head of cattle there. My son milked 16, and I milked 16 every morning and night. And then after we got up, we went to Sparks High School. And that's where I went in my, let's see, 7th and 8th grades, I guess, there. And
So what were you thinking, Cutie, about what you were going to do after high school? When did you begin to think about that?
well, I really didn't know because we didn't have any money, but the man who owned the farm was a banker. And I guess he saw something in me he liked, thank God. He told me that he would see that I went to Towson University in order to get an education. And he would see that he knew that Dad couldn't finance it, but he would take care of financing it for me, which would be $100 a year. Then the tuition was, and his nephews were also in my high school class, and they went to Towson. So I had a ride every morning, and that's where it all began. But in my first year, it worked out fairly well. A lot of homework, and Dad come up to check on me at night. I would be asleep, sitting up in bed, trying to literally, where I went to sleep doing my homework.
Falling asleep doing your work.
And my second year, beginning of my second year at Towson, the gentleman who was the head of the phys ed department, Dr. Donald Thompson, came up to me and he said, "Thompson." "Yes, sir." "I watched you last year and you were pretty fast on your feet. And I want you to come out for the teams this year." Beginning my second year. I said, "Dr. Minigan, I can't." Well, with that, he slapped his hand across my face and said, "Thompson, don't ever let me hear you say again, 'I can't.'" "What do you mean?" I said, he said, "When I say I can't, I don't want to hear you say it again, because I want you to know that there is always a way." Well, we got to talking a lot and figured out them things, and there was always a way.
But Cutie, you weren't a big guy.
Well, in high school, I was under 4 feet tall, under 5 feet tall. I was about 4'10", I think. I weighed 108 pounds in high school. And I just loved sports. And the coach in high school would not let me try out for any teams just because I was so small. But I was a manager. I kept all the scores, took care of all the clothing. And I never will forget the last day of that high school year. The last game, it was at Towson High School. He only had 4 men, 4 students
Is this
to
for
play it. And he looked at me. "Get your uniform on, get out there." You heard me. So I scored 22 points.
Did you really?
And he said, "Well, where you been?" I said, "You told me I couldn't play." But anyway.
But Doc Minigan
But
saw
anyway,
things
Doc
differently.
Minigan, when I say he took me by the hand and was my second father, he told me how to work some time into studies. And what happened then, I got a room down there just off Burke Avenue, and I had to have some way to pay for it. And so at a corner of Burke Avenue, there used to be a Texaco station. Well, I got a job there after hours and on the weekends in the summer for 22.5 cents an hour.
There you go.
And I had it for about 3 years, and I never got a cent raise. But it was enough to pay my room and board. And Doc was determined that I would make the teams, and he used to have me stay in the afternoons after games or after practice, and we would go through the skills necessary to play my position. And I became the best shooting two-handed set shooter in in the area. Anyway, when I graduated in 1942, bless Doc's heart and kindness and soul, I ended up being the captain of the soccer and basketball team. I was selected as a member of the All-Southern soccer team. I was selected as a member of the All-State basketball team, received the Outstanding Student Athletic Award at Towson, and was selected as a member of Who's Who in American Colleges and Universities.
Wonderful.
And all because of Donald Minigan, Doc, really my second father. And we stayed in touch because he was determined that I was going to Springfield in Massachusetts. That's where he went. And he was going to make a coach out of me. But after 1942, we all know what happened. In 41, when Japan struck us, and so what was I going to do? I knew that I would be drafted, probably,
Right.
and I didn't want to go in the Army. So I applied for a commission in the Navy. I was dumbfounded when they told me that I had to weigh 132 pounds and have my degree. And what happened then, not wanting to go in the Army, and I couldn't get a commission in the Navy, and I was determined that I enlisted in the Navy on August 28, 1942. And they sent me to Great Lakes for a boot camp. And at boot camp, having an education, a college education, I got involved with, or they had me involved with all the paperwork, making up the watch list and keeping all the records. And that kept me busy, but then they assigned me to a radio gunnery school.
Oh.
And I ended up being on in the group of, they were PB-2Y escorts, flying up and down the East Coast submarine hunting. And after I went and had gone and got my training in the Morse code, and how to fire a 35 millimeter gun from from the airplane. I gained some weight. I ate all the sweets I could possibly, and then I applied again for my commission. And in order to do that, I would have to go to Columbia University.
And why did you have to do that?
Because it was 6 months training
I see.
for a commissioned officer. So I went up there, and there were 6,000 of us.
Oh my heavens.
6,000 of us at Columbia. We took over all the dormitories. And here were all these 6,000 naked jaybirds running around, and going through the final stages where they do the physical, complete physical on you, I had to weigh 132, and I really only weighed 124.
Uh-oh.
And I knew I was in trouble, and I cheated. You didn't hear this. At 4, yes, I did. I contacted all the corners and made an 8 out of it. God forgive me. But I thought, I've come this far, I'll try again. So as I was checking out, we had to go through the Admiral for the final say-so. And he looked at me. Thompson? Yes, sir. You're awfully small. I said, Admiral, that's all I've heard all my life. And he said, what's that thing around your neck? I said, that's my dog tag. He said, you from the service? I said, yes, I'm from the service. I'm a radio gunner. Well, he said, you've come this far, go for it.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So when they gave me a pat on the back and I was admitted to officers training school at Columbia, there it was a 4-month program. First month was washout program. The second month, the second 3 months, well, it was another college course almost. And it was very, very intense. And upon graduation, God rest their souls in peace, 90% of them were sent to Little Creek, Virginia, landing craft.
Oh.
And when I say suicide, I mean suicide. And he looked at me and says, well, since you know something about communications, I'm assigning you to the USS Enterprise, aircraft carrier. I said, you sure what you're saying? He said, I'm sure, and you get your clothes together because it's tied up at Washington, D.C., Washington State. I forget the name of the sea, but it doesn't make any difference. And I want you to go aboard as a communication officer. So that was the story behind the beginning of my tour of duty in World War II. And as it turned out, I was I was put on the captain's staff, and I handled all the coding and decoding of messages, and had to see that they were delivered to the right departments. It was most interesting, but very demanding. And after we were completely overhauled, we went on trial runs between Seattle, Washington is what I was trying to say, Seattle and Pearl Harbor.
Oh my heavens.
And then from there, I had it here, but it doesn't make any difference. From there, we started recapturing the islands in the Pacific.
Wow.
And we started out with the Marshall and Gilbert Islands, and then went across, taking each island back, and it was up to the task force. There were 3 of them involving 2 big carriers, 2 little carriers, 2 battleships, ships, 4 cruisers and 10 destroyers. And it was our job to go in and pound the facilities in all these islands and wipe out their aircraft and their ships. And that was that's where the other students who were in my class came in, because they had to go in with their landing craft in and take over the islands completely, up the government. And we came then to the Marshall and Gilbert Islands, and we ran into the Japanese fleet. And they were to the north of the islands, and we were to the south of the islands. And I had a copy here of the battles.
Oh, and you gave me a copy of the battles.
There were 13 major engagements. The Marshall and Gilbert Islands were the biggest one, because that's where we engaged the Japanese aircraft, and they struck the islands, and they also struck our task force. And during the battle stations, being in charge of the communications, I was also in charge of all the visual communications, the lights and the flags. So my job was was up in the flight deck, or above the flight deck, really, where all the lights and the flags were. And I must say that well, it doesn't make you believe, I guess, but it makes you wonder, because the flags above my head, were full of bullet holes. And I was fortunate that I was not hit by any of them. But also, when the Japs struck our fleet, which was south, they came down across the islands. They had what they called suicide bombers. And in order to make direct hits sometime, or try to make a direct hit with their bombs, they didn't. But what they did with the task force I was in, they dropped a 1,000-pound bomb on the Franklin, our sister ship, and then did a rollover and did a suicide strike by crashing their aircraft into the San Jacinto, a small carrier. And we had part planes there ready to go up, and it actually exploded completely. And so with all the damages that was done to the flight decks of the aircrafts, carriers, and we had literally hundreds and hundreds of planes in the air with no place to land. And I can see them to this day, being up topside. They turned on all the lights, after dark now, turned on all the lights, had the planes landing in the ocean, and their pilots were being picked up by by the destroyers, and then it didn't really take care of everything. Then they started landing the aircraft aboard the ships who really had damaged flight decks. Well, what they did, they landed them, got the pilot out, and then pushed the ships, the aircraft over the side. And then we managed to go to Carl Ulithi, which was, I might say, a grounding spot for anchoring of our ships. And we hadn't been at Ulithi long. By this time, I guess almost 2 years had passed. I get a little choked up when I think of all
I would think so.
the people, all the brave men who made the sacrifice and are pushing up roses. But we were at Ulithi and having a little, you might say, a little rest with some beer ashore. Some man going up and down the islands began to yell, "Thompson, Thompson." Oh God, what have I done now? He says, "Here's a message for you." For me? Yes, you're to pack your bag, no more than 40 pounds, and you are to take the first flight out of here back to Pearl Harbor. Is that, yeah. You sure you got the right Thompson? He said, "You have number 1 flight orders, and you're to leave within an hour." I said, oh my, what have I done now, or what am I going to have to do? But back to Pearl Harbor we went, and there were about 30 of us in the group. We were immediately sent over to the air station, and we headed south to Sydney, Australia.
Oh my heavens.
And then after we got aboard and everything, we were told, you are going to, because the Germans are about ready to capitulate, you are going, the English has released, Great Britain has released their fleet to come over here and assist us in finishing up the Japanese. I said, and we, what, and us? Since no one in the world, not even our allies, could have our coding machines, you people are going aboard. You sailors are going aboard and do all the communications for the British. And then that's where I was when the Japanese finally capitulated. I was with the British. And then it was a question of going home. Well, by then I guess it was 47. Yes. And the ship I was on was USS Enterprise, CV number 6. It received the President Unit Citation for being the most outstanding and the most efficient ship in the Navy.
Wonderful.
And all of the sailors aboard and officers received that citation and was presented to us on an individual basis.
Very nice.
After finishing up with the Japs, I did manage to get back to Pearl Harbor. And it seemed like it, well, you just stand around and fool around until your name comes up to get transportation back to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to run into Captain, I'll call his name in a few minutes.
Okay.
But he was the captain of the Enterprise I ran into.
Oh.
And Thompson, what are you doing here? Of course, I took care of all of his communication for him.
Right.
And I told him the story. And I really didn't know how long I'd be here before I went back home and got started in something. He said, "You're going back tomorrow morning. I got
Whoa.
transportation for you." And so he got me aboard an aircraft the very next morning, and I got out and came back over to the United States.
Wow.
And then
That must have been a defining experience.
it really was because you only have one thing in mind, and except, of winning the battle.
Uh-huh.
And except I did do a lot of thinking, communication within my own mind, heart, and soul. Well, what are you going to do once you get your feet on the ground, and off the ocean? I really didn't know, and I didn't have any job, and a friend of mine, a friend of my wife's, got me a job at McDonogh School.
Mm-hmm.
Never heard of her. And I was teaching the 5th and 6th grade.
Uh-huh.
And I taught for 3 years. And being a people person, I felt so confined that I wanted to branch out and get involved with more people. So off to Columbia I went again to get my master's.
Uh-huh. And what did you get your master's in?
Well, I went up there to get my master's in education, elementary education.
Mm-hmm.
And I got an apartment. I hadn't even gotten unpacked. I got orders to report to Washington, D.C. to the Naval Security Station and the CIA because you're going to be involved in communications, in cleaning up the mess in the Pacific. I said, oh my God. So back I came and ended up then in Washington, and I was so confined over there that I bought a house.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife taught school over there then. Oh. And while I was involved with the Navy, well, not only the Navy, but involved with the military. And excuse me. And then it looked as if I had investigated education, teacher, and would you believe that they wanted to start me out at base salary and would not give me credit for any time I'd spent in the service.
Oh, my heavens.
So I and another friend of mine, we marched our tails down to Annapolis, and we got that changed in a hurry. And
Now, were you going back to McDonogh School?
no,
No?
I taught 3 years there, but
Right.
I had decided that, I was so far behind in everything related to education
Uh-huh.
that I would consider just staying in the service and retiring from the service.
Ah.
And I was busy. I was busy. And as I said about our house, my wife taught, and what happened then, I got so involved with the CIA and the admiral of the staff of the Naval Security Station that they had me doing all kinds of work related to communication and coding and decoding of messages that in a picture somewhere here I'll show you after a while. I was sending the messages out, and they were going to I have to backtrack just a little.
Sure.
When I went to Columbia to get my master's,
Mm-hmm.
I was called back for 3 more years in the Korean War.
Right.
I didn't have to go overseas, but I had to serve it in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew through all the communication of the admirals and the captains what was going on. And I sent the messages out, and I sent one out about the strike that was coming up on Korea, North Korea. And then one was notifying the landing craft, and the other was notifying the Air Force strike. I noticed that they had them on 2 different days.
Uh-oh.
This is in the middle
Yeah.
of the night. I called the admiral, and I said, I hate to bother you, but this is what's happening. Is this the way it's supposed to be? So for God's sake, no. So he out of bed and down and got it straightened out. And then that's when I, in 1951, received a personal U.S. Navy citation for outstanding service in the naval intelligence during the Korean War.
Uh-huh.
Well, at that time, I
Well,
couldn't tell what it was for.
It sounds like you saved the day.
Well, he said I saved thousands of lives.
Wow.
And then in this service, you're moving around from place to place,
Mm-hmm.
and you really never develop any close friends.
Right.
And this began to bother me too, but I didn't know what to do about it. But the gentleman by the name of Dr. Robert L. Lamborn, who was the headmaster of McDonogh School, he saw me in my 3 years of teaching in the 5th and 6th grades.
Uh-huh.
And he came over to Washington to see me. I said, what the hell are you doing over here? He says, I'm starting a new program at McDonogh.
Mm.
I said, what kind of program? He says, I'm going to found, establish, and instigate a middle school.
Mm.
And I want you to be head of it. I said, And I said, in no way. I'm going back there and be over those kids, teachers that were there when I was teaching in the lower school, 5th and 6th grade. That doesn't make any difference. Well, Karen, if I may call you Karen,
Of course.
he says, you're coming. I said, no, not enough money. Well, he came over to Washington, I don't know how many times, and tried to cowtail me into coming back. And then let's see, how was it? One Sunday, my family went to the Clemble Area Methodist Church where Dad was superintendent all the time. And after services one day, I walked out. This is in the latter part of, after the Korean War, latter part of the 40s. And he says, Judy? I said, yes, sir. He says, I'm still looking for an answer from you, and I want a positive one, that you're coming back and head my middle school at McDonogh. I said, and I started saying, don't say anything, just come on out here, because you see my car over there? Yes. He said, I got you hemmed in, and you're not going anywhere until you say yes. That's the truth. Well, he increased my offer for salaryship, and I finally said yes. And then I guess it was in 1953 that the middle school was founded. But before that, it didn't last long, but I guess it was very important. This was just before the Korean episode. I was appointed as Director of Development at Towson University.
So you were still somewhat connected then to your alma mater.
This was sort of this was before then, before 1950.
Okay.
And well, when I got my first paycheck, it was for only $10,000 a year. I said, "You expect me to live on this?" Well, there was some type of a conflict between that and my military service. They couldn't pay me anymore.
Oh.
I said, okay, if that's the case, then I'll just work for nothing and do as I please, go and come as I please, and try to raise some money. Well, as it turned out, that's where my volunteer service started, because I wasn't going to get paid, so
Well, I'm
with
sure
a volunteer service at Towson University for 50 years, and my full-time job as head of the middle school, and
So tell us a little bit about your full-time career at McDonogh. How long were you in that position? And that was probably a pretty revolutionary idea at the time, to have a middle school rather than just a lower and an upper school.
well, I asked Dr. Lamborn, Dr. Lamborn, Bob, who I'm very friendly with, I asked him, why in the world you want me to be this? I don't know whether I can handle it or not. And he said, excuse me for not looking into you because of light, but he says, I saw you and watched you do your teaching in those 3 years in the lower school, the 5th and 6th grade. And he said, I like what I saw because you had discipline in the classroom. And he says, I'm a firm believer that without discipline, there's no learning.
Mm.
And he said, that's what I want in my middle school.
Oh.
And I had some other criteria here, but it was interesting. I got in touch with Dr. Lamborn, who lives over in Columbia, and he was excited as I was about being interviewed.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I want you to be sure to tell him that, well, he's got about the 5th and 6th grade, but that as a result of that training, the school's administration considered your performance as a teacher in these crucial grades was outstanding. That the school, Towson, in judging the effectiveness of the traditional 6-6 administrative organization, decided that it did not deal satisfactorily with the needs of adolescents, and that those would be better off by a 4-4-4 organization, and adopted that organization for the school. In implementing the decision, created a 4-grade middle school. And that in searching for a person who was considered to be qualified by training, experience, and personality for the task of creating such a school, they turned at once to you, searching you out and asking you to take on the responsibility. That you were employed to create a school that fulfilled these purposes, given only an understanding of the vision and left to do the job as you believed it should be done. That your performance was considered to so successful that representatives of the public school came to study what you were doing at McDonogh and was so pleased that you held the post for 32 years. Well, what you might be interested in, once I got started and was looking for some directions from Dr. Lamborn, he looked at me and said, Thompson, you got it. You take it and run with it, because I have faith in you that you can work it out. Well, I liked students, I liked youth, and I like people. And I want you to know that my name is Quinton Donald Thompson, that from the very beginning in my household, I was called QD, because Quinton seemed too difficult for everybody to say back in those days. So I have been called QD all of my life, not only by personnel, but by everyone, including all of my students at McDonogh. I was QD. And I think maybe I told you that in the process of the middle school and also volunteer work at Towson University. And I was also chairman of AIMS, which was the Association of Independent Schools in Maryland. I organized that, was chairman of that. Everything which I mentioned to you was going on at the same time.
You were a busy person.
I had 3 full-time jobs at one time, and as I think I mentioned a minute ago, every night that I really didn't go to bed. I stayed in the office all night and sort of crapped out in my chair a little bit. Never even went home. And but I was doing what I liked and working with people, and along with my being head of the middle school, I built up a beautiful relation in my volunteer work with Towson University, involving Hoke Smith, Jim Fisher, M. Teresa Wiedefeld, who was the first one that was there when I was there, and wrote a beautiful letter of recommendation for me to go to officers training school. And I told you I had to be a sailor for a while. There I was as a sailor.
There you are with Mary Schwartz.
That's right.
Cutie, tell us a little bit about your long-standing relationship with Towson University. I mean, you have and also share with us Towson's acknowledgement of 50 years of volunteerism and philanthropy with the university. Since that's one of those jobs that was keeping you awfully busy.
What did I do with here to Well, in October the 23rd
What year?
in 2004, Towson honored me with a dinner, dessert, dinner and dessert and program in recognition of my 50 years of volunteer service at Towson. And I have here a copy of the program, which can't be read, but it had.
Well, tell me who spoke. Who were the people who talked about your that whatever gene you had that says it's important to give back, and I think a number of people had things to say.
Yes, they did, and first was the person that was invited to attend that couldn't attend because he was in California was Dr. Lamborn, my headmaster at McDonogh School. Do I read that?
I don't think we'll put it in with your interview.
All right. It was
Why don't you?
just a couple
Of
sentences
course,
out of that.
absolutely.
I first met QD when he arrived at the lower school at McDonogh in '47. You've heard that he was relatively a small fella. He stayed there for 47 through 49. That's not right. For 47 through 49, 3 years.
Well, you were there 3 years as a teacher, and then he's.
Oh, yeah, that's it. 3 years is not long to make a name for yourself, but he made one, and the way he made it was to be himself and to make everyone that he knew and came in contact with know that he was real. There was nothing phony about QD. What you saw, you got, and what you was, a person who looked you in the eye, patted you on the back, told you when you were wrong, told you when you were right, helped you when you were up, helped you when you were down, encouraged you when you were up, and sent you on your way. At the end of those 3 years, the word around the lower school was that the boys thought he was great. The faculty members, most of them teachers, thought he was wonderful, except the younger ones who thought he was cute. The parents liked him, and everyone thought that he did what was good for the school and for the individuals.
And then he brought you back.
Yes.
Yes. So who else spoke at this occasion?
All right, he was invited and he couldn't come, so
Right.
he was,
But a lot of people were there.
Yes,
I think Gary Rubin had some things to say.
Dr. Corrett was there
Uh-huh.
and spoke.
And did you?
I don't have a copy of the remarks that they were made. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
And
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
you-
Dr. Rubin spoke.
Yes.
And he reviewed sort of the story of my life, which you've heard part of, and said that during his years in the U.S. Navy and his 35-year career with McDonogh School, he continued his enthusiastic support of his alma mater, Towson.
Yes.
He has been tremendously influential in the alumni relations and development area of the university. He has served on the alumni board of directors and was the president of the association for 6 years, during which time he helped to initiate the university's first phone-a-thon, now an annual project. He also served on the Towson University Foundation board of directors for 12 years. In '68, he was inducted into the Athletic Hall of Fame and continues to serve on the board of directors. In 1981, QD was presented with the TU Distinguished Alumni Award. And he goes on for 2 or 3 pages.
Uh-huh.
And then I spoke, thanking Dr. Corrett.
Very nice.
I don't know where the other copies of the speakers are. I thought I had
Well,
them.
I think, didn't your brother speak? Didn't you have family there that spoke?
Yes.
And maybe your son? I think.
Was that at Towson or was that at the?
I think so. So that was a wonderful occasion, and I hope it was gratifying to hear your alma mater acknowledge just what a wonderful friend you have been for an awfully long time.
The people who spoke there was also, while I was involved with these other 3 jobs at one time, I was also superintendent of our United Methodist Church at
Well,
Pikesville.
there you go. No wonder you didn't sleep.
Then I believe so strongly in what Dr. Lamborn wanted me to do was be the head of the middle school. That as I said earlier, we had visitors started out with all the local schools, independent schools, and then the public schools in the surrounding areas, and then in the state. And then I actually had visitors from Ohio and Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And they began to adopt the program of the middle school and saw that it was the most, also realized that it was the most impressionable years of a student life, of a person's life, and that it needed special attention that they weren't getting anywhere else. And by establishing a school 4, 4, and 4, at first that was Dr. Lamborn's idea. I had grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. It also offered the opportunity in the upper school of having programs, academic programs of 4 years of program in their studies, like history, science, foreign languages, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 years. And before that, it was lower school was, elementary school was 6 grades.
Right.
And then you had the junior high and the senior high, and which the 4, 4, 4 program eliminated. And then the opportunity to have in the upper school, particularly in athletics, they began to have varsity teams, and where before they didn't have any teams really when it was 3 junior high and senior high.
Right.
In the senior high, a 3-year program, they had a small program, but then it really developed into a very sophisticated athletic program. And I guess one of the most satisfying and heartwarming publications that I ever saw was published in the I guess it was in the Tire Light. Yeah, it was in the Tire Light. In November the 14th, 2011. Middle school education now offered as a major at Towson University. And they had come out to talk with me.
So you were the pioneer.
I talked with, what's his name? Dr. The head of the Department of Education.
Oh, Lorian. Ray
yes,
Lorian.
Ray Lorian. I talked with him many, many times.
Uh-huh.
And
It's got to be gratifying because this was a concept that you were in charge of for more than 3 decades, 3.5 decades.
And yes, I don't know whether we won't get involved in reading it all, but on the I'll get a date here. I guess it was, see, 50 years. I guess it was 85. 85. The middle school at McDonogh was honored for their happy birthday. And they invited me back. I got to share in the activities. And
Wonderful.
And then they printed the story of my life at McDonogh in their magazine. And I don't know whether you saw that. And
I do. You gave me a
got you a
copy.
copy. And well, I guess it was in 1994 I was still doing volunteer work for Towson.
Mm-hmm.
And I came out here at Edenwald, my retirement center where I live now, and
Right.
I came out here to do some begging from some of the graduates who from Towson. And one day I walked into, they had a little country store here. I walked in and I looked at this lady, and I looked at her, who's the cashier. I said, "I should know you." She said, "Yes, you should, Lieutenant Thompson." See, but
Oh,
then
my heavens. Yeah.
Yes, you should, Lieutenant Thompson. You had my 2 boys in school at McDonogh.
Ah.
I said, "And your name?" She said, "Friedman." And I said, "Yes, your son's name were Steve and Paul." And that was 30 years ago.
Mm.
I remembered their names.
Wow.
Because I made it a point of learning all the kids' names, and to this day, I can be walking along the street and some of them be yelling QD.
Mm-hmm.
Literally thousands and thousands of them. But anyway, we yacked for a while, and then I was out here again, ran into her in the hallway. And we chatted for a while. So where are you headed for? I said, "I'm going to Utah skiing. And when I come back, I'll buzz you. Well, I buzzed her and married her. So we moved into Edenwald in 1994,
Very nice.
where I have
Very nice.
been heavily involved for a long while of being, like George Hall, being chairman of the Residents Association, and I started and organized our scholarship program, which is one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. We started giving our employees who work, mostly servers in the dining room, work for 325 hours. We started off with $500, and slowly people have been contributing to it, our residents, that now an annual gift is up to $1,500.
Wonderful.
And the kids,
That's wonderful.
the kids just love it because it helps them out tremendously. And but it's easy for them to get the time in if they go to schools around here like Towson, Morgan State, Community College.
Baltimore County.
I
Or
should have had my cough drop. And
Cutie, we only have about 5 minutes left.
what?
I know. You've been talking for a while. I think it's wonderful that you have sort of upped the ante on this $500 now, $1,500 to the servers and other people who are at Edenwald. I mean, you have brought the same leadership here that you brought to your Navy experience and McDonogh School and Towson University. I just wondered, before we run out of time, if there was anything that you want to say to young people who are considering a career in education as a teacher and or an administrator, if there was some sort of parting thought or wisdom you would want to share with them.
Yes, there is. I have here statements by Hope Smith, Jim Fisher. Oh my, and here's a word from my kids speaking in here. But you have copies of those, so we
I
won't
do.
repeat those. But I have, in my spare time now, my now 91, and my medical problems, weak heart, I have so many stents in my heart now that there's not room anymore, believe it or not, that's what they say. But the last stent they put in was a stent inside of another stent.
Oh.
But I moved from being very active in the activities and the staff of Edenwald, that I moved into assisted living now.
Mm-hmm.
And I still try to stay active in particularly the structure of our assisted living groups. And being so active all my life, I just can't sit down.
Right.
When I moved in, they moved me in, I felt absolutely lost. I said, what the hell is it for me to do? What am I going to do around here to stay alive? And my son, don't worry, Dad, I'll take care of it. Well, he got me a computer.
Mm-hmm. I know.
A big TV, and I subscribed to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and do a lot of reading and a lot of writing to the letters to the Sun and to the Towson Times. In fact, I think I have one. I think it's the most important one I've ever written in my life. I hope will be out Wednesday, and calling for the United States to become more prominent as a nation for the world as we used to be, instead of being a nation, unfortunately, of food stamp eaters, welfare lines, unemployment, and making some suggestions, not getting involved in the political aspect, but how I thought we had to reestablish ourselves in order to save civilization. Because to me, the salvation of civilization is the education of our youth, not only in the United States, but in the whole wide world, regardless of their race, creed, or color. And to me, and let them know that we are all interwoven, and all of our youth has to receive a basic general education in order to realize that such a education of all of our youth is going to be the only salvation of society, of our civilization. And if they don't do that, then we are goners. And I firmly believe and would like to see the United States take a leading role in this through the United Nations. And
So that would make people who are considering being a teacher very important people.
well, it would indeed, and they'd have to, well, they would be the leaders of the salvation of our country, of the world. And I get so upset when I think of the people that our businesses, our small businesses, are not in operation to hire these people who are in the bread lines, because they should experience the procedure of caring for themselves and enjoy the burden of life in raising a happy welfare family. And if you read the Towson Times, this coming, what would it be? It's coming Saturday, this Sunday, this coming Wednesday. I've tried to explain a little bit of it in there.
So your words to prospective teachers would be?
They would be the real leaders of society. And
a good life?
Pardon?
And being a teacher, an educator, a good life?
Absolutely, and make it worthwhile. When I say worthwhile, that they can make a living, a good living, which is highly respected by our society, and make them see that it's the only method of redemption to save civilization. I honestly believe that. And also, society has got to realize that they have a contribution, personal contribution to make toward this, which becomes extremely heartwarming and satisfying, because I started to say it, not being critical, but it's the honest truth. I feel that even our government today, in Congress, in the Senate, that before they look after their constituents at home, they first look after themselves in establishing a lifetime retirement fund. They turn it into a self-propelled institute rather than one which is the salvation of their constituents.
I'd like you to say something to our teacher candidates who are considering, I mean, it's a lot of education, and I think you could really inspire them. Tell them how important their career and their commitment is.
I mentioned earlier that
Are we on?
Yes.
I mentioned earlier that Dr. Minigan was really my second father, and he changed me from a person who always I had to make excuses because of other things I did, and he changed me to, Doc was able to instill in me a sense of determination, confidence, self-discipline, and a will to be successful into I can do it. He also developed an individual relationship with each of us, many of whom have spoken out on his behalf. He faithfully believed that eventually we all would make some worthwhile contribution to society. And that's when he lassoed me and made a server out of me through the physical education department. And I was honored. We stayed friends all of his life, and he corresponded with me while I was overseas. I would take his letters into the the lavatory, and read them after dark, after our duties, with tears running down my face. And when I came back overseas, I looked him up, and he lived to be 10 days short of 100. And his family honored me by giving his eulogy at the Cathedral Church over here on Charles Street. Society, in my estimation, has to find some way to stimulate individuals to go into the teaching profession. There are over 30 million teachers in the United States, and they have a union called the NEA, National Education Association. And what bothers me about this union is they are politically bound.
Mm.
And by being politically bound, they are not really entitled, I feel, to speak their own mind.
Mm.
And this, again, I do not think is a worthy aspect of a democracy, that they're being dictated to rather than a chance of expressing themselves individually. And this is one reason that I would love to see them do away with the union, and or at least not to have it connected with the political aspect. But I just hope that someday they will speak for themselves as individuals and not a political working group. I would also like to say just a word about what I was looking for a minute ago, about meeting my maker. Lots of people don't agree with me on this, but when I was aboard ship, I had an awful lot of time to do some thinking sometime, because there you do come next to time to come back to your God, you might call it. And I did an awful lot of thinking, and I have written letters and they've been published that how can there be so many gods in the world when every race, creed, or color has a God? And supposedly there was one with Jesus Christ, Father. I said there can only be one God that serves us all. And that God is composed of having faith in something by which you express yourself and call on when you feel you are in need. Well, when you're in need, you're really talking to yourself. And I found my God. And that God is with me all the time. And that God is Mother Nature, in whom I have my faith. Adios, friends. I love you all.